Let's turn to the war in Ukraine, where satellite images show Russian troops moving towards the Ukraine border as Kyiv braces for eastern offensive. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has accused Moscow of committing genocide. Reports from the Kremlin also reveals Russia's claims that 1,026 Ukrainian soldiers have surrendered in the besieged southeastern port city of Mariupol. In the meantime, the leaders of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia are to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Kyiv. There is more update in this report.
We saw today's inflation data.
U.S. President Joe Biden says his Russian counterpart, President Vladimir Putin, is committing genocide in Ukraine, where concerns are mounting over the killing of civilians and the prospects of a new Russian offensive in the country's east. Speaking to reporters in Iowa about a plan to curb rising gas prices in the United States, President Biden used the word genocide to describe events in Ukraine.
I'm not going to wait to take action to help American families. I'm doing everything within my power by executive orders to bring down the price and address the Putin price hike. In fact, we've already made progress since March inflation data was collected. Your family budget, your ability to fill up your tank, none of it should hinge on whether a dictator declares war and commits genocide in half a world away.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin, together with his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko, visited the Vostochny Cosmodrome in Russia's Amur region on Cosmonautics Day. A bilateral meeting of the leaders is planned, after which they will talk to reporters. This will be the first regional trip of the Russian president this year. And staying with Moscow, Russia's defense ministry says on Wednesday that 1,026 soldiers of Ukraine's 36th Marine Brigade, including 162 officers, had surrendered in the besieged port city of Mariupol. There was no immediate comment from the Russian president's office, the Ukrainian General Staff, or the defense ministry. Russia says 151 wounded Ukrainian soldiers were treated on the spot and taken to Mariupol City Hospital. And in what appears a swift response, Ukrainian authorities say they captured a prominent pro-Kremlin tycoon who escaped from house arrest after Russia's invasion. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy posted a photo online of a disabled-looking Viktor Medvedchuk with his hands in cuffs and dressed in a Ukrainian army uniform. He had been under house arrest in the capital Kyiv on suspicion of treason, but escaped soon after Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24. Elsewhere, Lithuanian parliament has proposed qualifying Russia's military aggression in Ukraine as genocide of the Ukrainian nation and called on the international community to continue supplying a broad range of weapons to Kyiv. The parliament adopted a resolution to qualify war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the Russian Federation as genocide of the Ukrainian nation after duly assessing legal circumstances unanimously. The SEIMAS voted on the resolution after the virtual address of Ukrainian President Mr. Zelenskyy. In the meantime, satellite images taken on Monday and Tuesday respectively show a long military column moving into eastern Ukraine. The private U.S. company, Maxar Technologies, said the images show dozens of armored vehicles, troops with tanks and support equipment along the 14K34 highway and the corridor that leads in western Russia towards the border with Ukraine. Deployments were also positioned in fields and farms west of Solity and near the Russian towns of Dubrovka, Biruj, and Leonovka, approximately 5 miles east of the Ukraine border.
It's 3 p.m. in Nigeria and 10 a.m. in New York, where the police have now named a person of interest after a morning rush hour shooting at a subway station that left more than 220 people injured. The police say they were looking for 62-year-old Frank James in connection with the attack, as he had rented a U-Haul van that may be linked to the shooting. The key to the van rented in Philadelphia was found at the scene. We have details in this report.
The New York Police Department, NYPD, is asking anyone with information on his whereabouts to call a hotline. Mr. James has not been named as a suspect in the attacks just yet. Being identified as a person of interest means police believe he may have information concerning the crime. Reports suggest Mr. James, who has addresses in Wisconsin and Philadelphia, appears to have posted dozens of videos on social media in recent years in which he expresses bigoted views. More recently, he had also criticized New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Meanwhile, law enforcement and local leaders across the country have announced they are on high alert after the shooting on the New York City subway.
We increased our presence in our system, so every man and woman who's wearing a Bar Police uniform is out in the system this morning, and we'll continue to do that. This is in addition to what we do on a day-to-day basis. Our primary concern, obviously, is the safety of our riders and our employees, and today we just added a little extra emphasis in putting anybody that was in the uniform out into the system.
And this is not being investigated as an act of terrorism at this time.
Earlier, in a briefing late on Tuesday, police gave more details of the incident, which saw a male attacker detonate 2 smoke grenades and open fire at Brooklyn's 36th Street station. The attacks unfolded shortly before 8:30 local time on Tuesday, and police say the man had a Glock 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Images from the scene showed bloodied passengers lying on the floor of the smoke-filled station. Another 13 people suffered injuries related to smoke inhalation, falling down, or a panic attack, the police chief said. All of the victims are expected to survive. Investigators found the Glock handgun, 3 extended magazines, a hachet, and a range of potential incendiary devices at the scene.
And joining me now to discuss this developing story is Sam Fateh. He's a global affairs analyst. He joins me from Washington, D.C. Good to have you join us.
My pleasure.
So before we go to the broader issue, talk to us about what you know about where the police are now in this situation, and then what the operating theory is.
Well, the NYPD is leading this case, and they are still in search of the man. We don't know. At this time, they did not say if they suspect if he's still in New York or if he had crossed state lines going into other neighboring states. And so they are still in search of him. They identified him as a person of interest. Of course, some news reports labeled him as a suspect. But the NYPD right now, that is taking the lead, have not said where they think he is. They are still in search of him. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody knows if he's getting some kind of support. We are talking about a man who has released several videos. I mean, talking of violence, criticizing Eric Adams, criticizing some of the policies, even criticizing the recent appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson, who he said was married to a white man that angered him. And he did express in a marketing video that he had post-traumatic stress disorder, so which also means that he practically not mentally very stable. So he is considered armed and dangerous, and nobody knows where he is. But if he crossed state lines, then the FBI would take this over from the NYPD. But the manhunt is on.
And just to be clear, a person of interest is someone who has information concerning an incident, not necessarily the person responsible for it. I just wanted to make that clear for anyone who is wondering why he's been named a person of interest and not a suspect. But we also know that there were postings on YouTube connected to this person of interest, where he mentioned New York. He mentioned homelessness, and he also mentioned New York Mayor Eric Adams. And we understand that security around the mayor has now been tightened. Is he in any immediate threat? Is he under any immediate threat?
I mean, it will be considered to be a threat, especially when somebody carries out an attack like this and nobody knows where he is. You don't know who his next target is. So you would think that the people that this individual has been criticizing might be the next target. Even if you don't know who this individual, like who they are targeting, there are key individuals within cities when something occurs within a city or even a country. There are people that you know at the end of the day, looking at the nature of the crime and from an analysis perspective, what the intent of that crime is supposed to be to protect. So with or without that, the security around the mayor and certain key people in the city is going to get beefed up, one. Now, what is very essential here and what is very confusing about this, like you said, it's good that you try to clarify to people what a suspect and a person of interest is. Because also, as soon as the incident happened, some of the false description that was released by authorities said they were looking for a man who was 5'5", weighs about 180 pounds, and has orange shirt on. Of course, he had a gas mask on as well. So this person went into the subway with all intent to commit violence and to carry out a serious act of violence. Now, whether this is described as terrorism or not depends on when they apprehend the suspect, what his state of mind is and what his affiliations are, And so, again, it is ideal and it is wise and it's a good call to give up security around the mayor, because homelessness in the subway has been a very difficult conversation in New York for a very long time. New York is loaded with homeless people. New York, the rent is high. The mayor did take certain initiatives and policy reforms in order to address these things, which many people also feel are not adequate. So there are some people that are not happy with these decisions, but the mayor says his goal is to get people out of the subway and probably help them to get into the shelters. Now, we do not know to what extent and what kind of resources are available for Mayor Eric Adams to achieve, but he has been criticized for this by some of the people in the homeless community, and this may have angered some people, but the mayor is trying to keep the city clean and reverse the bad reputation that it has.
And talking about the mayor, he released a statement. I know that he's working from home, I think because of COVID-19, but he released a video message, I think that is, where he said, this rage, this violence, these guns, these relentless shootings are an American problem. That's according to Mayor Eric Adams. And then he called for changes to the gun laws in America. We also know that the background information to the person of interest, Frank James, did reveal that he has lived in 2 states in America, one of them Wisconsin. In both states, he had a criminal record, and then he also made really disturbing terrorist statements, not the kind of serious terrorist statement, but emotionally disturbing terrorist comments. Does America have a gun problem or a mental health problem?
Look, we have a mental health problem and we have a gun problem. These two you cannot separate, okay? Yes, America has these problems. But one thing I want to say is the gun culture, the gun is part of the American culture, and it's going to be very, very difficult to control. It's going to be very, very difficult to manage, and it's going to be very, very difficult to change. It is embedded in this Constitution in the Second Amendment rights. And so you have people that are supporting the Second Amendment rights that are powerful, they have the resources, they have the money to make sure that people that are sent to Congress in Washington, they are supported by them, and they make sure that they make it very difficult for any serious reforms to happen in terms of, the Second Amendment. I know President Joe Biden in his 4th term already has been trying to change some of these things. The Obama administration, so many other administrations had before and they failed, okay? But you have the Obama administration and all this pass certain executive orders in terms of background checks. States also have their own rules and their own laws, and sometimes these states, the feds cannot be everywhere. So sometimes the state authorities will refuse to enforce certain kind of laws. You can take them to the Supreme Court all you want, but they're not going to enforce it. So, and then you have certain states, borderline, what we call mess up the red states, where you can go into a pawn shop and buy a gun, where you can go into, a sort of a flea market and pretty much buy a gun. They have gun shows. So we do have that problem, okay? But what the Biden administration right now is trying to do is to say, look, we need to have background checks, regardless of where you are buying these guns from. We need to find a way to get rid of these semi-automatic rifles. They have caused so much damage from Sandy Hook, from the shooting that happened in Las Vegas. They are using the semi-automatic rifles. They are accessible. They're everywhere. It's like, how do I describe this for an African audience? It's like going to the store and buying chewing gum, right? That's how easy it is to go and buy a gun. I can pretty much walk into a store and buy one. So there is a gun problem. It needs to get resolved, but we need Congress to act on it. The president.
And I guess that's where the problem is, having that bipartisan resolution and legislation on this problem. But it is, like Adams said, it is an American problem, and America actually needs to fix it. Thank you so much for talking to us, Global Affairs Analyst Sam Fateh.
My pleasure.
And still in the U.S., a hotel under construction in Camarillo, California, was destroyed when a massive fire broke out Tuesday night. Firefighters with the Ventura County Fire Department were called to the hotel located at Ventura Boulevard and Las Posas Road at about 7:15 p.m. Investigators say when crews arrived, heavy smoke was pouring out from the second and fourth floor. At one point, Highway 101 was closed in both directions due to damage caused to nearby power lines. No injuries were reported, and the cause of the fire remains under investigation. Taiwan's military was spotted conducting drills near the National Kaohsiung University of Hospitality and Tourism with conspicuous MIM-23 Hawk missiles on Wednesday. Residents of the area noted that the drills conducted this time around had a more serious tone to it, as a bicyclist was questioned by a gun-slinging military man after seemingly filming some parts of the drills. The MIM-23 Hawk missile, which had been in use in Taiwan since 1963, has had over 50 years of service. The MIM-23 Hawk missile has an effective range of 40 kilometers and can reach a maximum speed of 800 meters per second. Aside from the main Taiwan island, the missiles are also deployed on offshore islands, including Green Island and Orchid Island. Although the missile is nearing its retirement age, the Taiwan military continues conducting drills that includes them, so the air defense can be as secure as can be. To the Middle East, where the bodies of 5 Kurdish migrants, including 2 children, were returned to the Kurdistan region on Tuesday, 4 months after they drowned in the Turkey-Greek waters. 2 of the victims were returned to the Raparin administration, one of the areas of the Kurdistan region where reportedly a large number of Kurdish migrants come from. Greece is one of the main routes into the European Union for refugees and migrants. However, the flow tapered off following the arrival of nearly 1 million people, including Syrian Kurds, in Europe after crossing to Greek islands close to Turkey in 2015. Tens of thousands of mostly young Kurds left the Kurdistan region for Europe last year in search of a better life using people's smuggling routes. A number of these migrants died in freezing temperatures on the Belarus-Poland border, and others drowned in the sea, suffering a catastrophic fate. The bodies of 16 migrants who drowned in the deadliest migrant disaster in the English Channel were returned to the Kurdistan region in late December. And now to the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Chancellor Rishi Sunak have rejected calls to resign despite being fined by police for breaking lockdown rules in Downing Street in June 2020. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister's wife all received fixed penalty notices for attending a birthday gathering for the Prime Minister in Number 10. As a result, Mr. Johnson became the UK's first serving Prime Minister to be sanctioned for breaking the law. All 3 apologized, but opposition members of Parliament say the Prime Minister and Mr. Sunak must quit. There is more in this report.
The UK Prime Minister, Mr. Johnson, says he felt an even greater sense of obligation to deliver, while the Chancellor says he was focused on delivering for the British people.
I understand the anger that many relating to an event in Downing Street on the 19th of June 2020. And let me say immediately that I've paid the fine, and I once again offer a full apology in all sincerity that people had the right to expect better. And now I feel an even greater sense of obligation to deliver on the priorities of the British people, strengthening our economy, creating jobs and opportunities, levelling up across the whole of the United Kingdom.
But bereaved families say there was simply no way they could either continue in the job, calling their actions truly shameless. Opposition parties accused Mr. Johnson and Mr. Sunak of lying to the public about their attendance at the Downing Street gathering, with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales demanding they step down. The SNP and the Liberal Democrats also led calls for Parliament to return from its Easter break so the PM and Chancellor could face questions from the MPs.
This is the first time in the history of our country that a Prime Minister has been found to be in breach of the law. And then he lied repeatedly to the public about it. Britain deserves better. They have to go.
All cabinet ministers have publicly backed Mr. Johnson and Mr. Sunak, including Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, who said they were delivering for Britain on many fronts. Others who called for him to resign earlier this year, including Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross, have not said they don't think he should. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said Mr. Johnson was mortified about being fined, but argued he had not set out with malice to break the law.
Things have moved on since then. It doesn't take away the anger, the fury that people still have, and rightly have, and I share that. But I'm also looking at the situation in Ukraine.
A total of 334 COVID-19 patients were discharged after recovery from hospitals in Shanghai on Tuesday, an official from Shanghai Municipal Health Commission said on Wednesday. According to the commission, more than 268,000 close contacts and 119,000 sub-close contacts had been found in the latest resurgence of the COVID-19 epidemic in the city. A total of 1,189 locally transmitted confirmed COVID-19 cases and 25,141 asymptomatic carriers were reported in Shanghai on Tuesday, Shanghai Municipal Health Commission said in its Wednesday reports. Recent improvements in relations between Lebanon and Gulf states have relieved the cash-strapped country's politicians. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait returned their ambassadors to Beirut in a move that slowly thaws a diplomatic crisis that has strained Lebanon since last October, sparked by critical comments of the Saudi-led coalition's war in Yemen. Lebanon's ties with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries were severely strained during the past year. The kingdom has especially been concerned about the smuggling of the illegal amphetamine Captagon pills into the Gulf and the growing influence of the Iran-backed Shia movement, Hezbollah, designated a terrorist organization by Riyadh.